All right, you guys, welcome back to the Jester Section Hiker Podcast, your premier podcast with the spotlight on section hikers. And I am your host, Julie Jester Gayheart. Really appreciate you all being here. If you are listening to the audio version of the show, thank you very much. If you are here live with us, we appreciate you watching and joining. And if you have questions as we go, please feel free to put them in the chat. In fact, let us know if you're in the chat, who you are, where you're from, what's happening. I have an amazing guest, you guys, with me today. And if there's one thing I can say on the Jester Section Hiker podcast, I never really know what I'm going to get into. And what I mean by that is sometimes it'll be a couple weeks before I need to record an episode, and I'll get an amazing email from somebody. And then I reach back out and I ask, hey, why don't you come on the show? And that is the case with today's guest. So before I introduce who that is, I just got a couple reminders. The first reminder is I went crazy over the last week or so, and I actually organized myself and scheduled all of my live recording episodes from now until June. I know you guys are like, Jester, you have gone insane. But what I wanted to do is make sure that, number one, I got enough episodes out there, and number two, I had enough content. And with that being said about the content is I'm finally going to do it. I am going to have my Appalachian Trail section hiker series. And you guys, that will start on March 26th. And what I mean by that is, so starting March 26th, I'm going to have a series of episodes. They're going to be single episodes. And it's going to be section hiking logistics in some of the most popular areas on the Appalachian Trail that people have asked me about. So the first episode is going to be section hiking Georgia. The second episode is section hiking the Smokies, and then section hiking the Shenandoahs, and then section hiking Connecticut, section hiking the Whites, which I have had several emails about logistics and just, do I backpack the Whites? Do I slack pack the Whites? And then I'm going to round out the series with section hiking the 100-mile wilderness. And all of that will start on March 26th with those recordings. So if you guys have an interest in learning all the logistics, hostels, shuttles, where to park your car, where to stay, what to do, highlights to see, things not to miss on the trail as a section hiker, we're going to hit it all at that area. And that is going to take us through June. And then in June, you guys know I'm an educator. I'm going to be taking a summer break and then picking back up with things this fall. So, hey, Chris, I see you in the chat. Yeah, it's going to be a great series. I have really been wanting to put this together for some time now. And I was going to do it last year, and it never got around to it. But I have actually been studying, doing my homework, and actually getting out my notes from when I went through those specific areas. And I'm going to tell it all. I'm going to give you guys all the information, and I think it'll be a good time. So mark your calendars. All of those dates are in the description below, and they will be in the audio show notes when this episode comes out. So I wanted to let you guys know that. Hey, Brian, I see you in the chat. Thanks for joining us. Ian, thanks for being here. I truly appreciate it. And now, you guys, I need to introduce my guest. He is an individual that reached out to me via email. And the only way I can think to introduce him is actually read his email. So he says, "Hey, Jester, I'm a thru hiker and section hiker, and I enjoy listening to your podcast. I'm glad you've taken it up again after a well-deserved break and hope you're recovering nicely from your surgery. You had a friend of mine as a guest a while back, Larry Haynes, or Lone Wolf. I had the pleasure of hiking with Larry on the last several days of our 2021 Colorado Trail thru hike, and it was so great to hear him talking about it. He's the real deal, and I look forward to following his future adventures. I'm retired, and I am loving hiking and backpacking. I volunteer as a park patroller for several state and local parks in my area. I've enjoyed getting my certified interpretive guide and wilderness first responder credentials. That was a mouthful. And I'm taking classes to be a certified naturalist for one of my local parks. I did do a 2,500-mile long-distance hike of my own creation back in 1987. He talked about that on an episode of Backpacker Radio podcast about a year ago. And you guys, I will put a link to that episode in the show notes as well, so you can listen to that when he talked about that on the Backpacker Radio show. And he is also a blogger for the Trek. Then he says, anyway, I'm glad you're back on the air and appreciate your focus on section hiking. So what I did is I reached out to Rolf and I said, hey, well, I should tell you, he ended the email like this. You offered to talk with people about questions for upcoming section hikes, and he's got several. So you guys, instead of answering Rolf's email, I said, hey, come on the show and let's answer those questions together. So without further ado, you guys, here's Rolf. Rolf, welcome to the show. And I'm going to have you pronounce your last name for everybody because I don't want to mess it up.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's Norwegian and it is a mouthful. First name's Rolf. I tell people Rolf like golf, and I've had people call me Golf. My last name is Asphaug, and I tell people it sounds like Austin Powers, and I've had people call me Austin Powers. But yeah, I get on a first name basis real fast with folks. So Rolf, or my trail name in the past, and I think going forward, is Kinnikinnick.
Kinnikinnick. Okay, somebody already put that in the chat. I think Larry. Hey, Larry. Larry's in the chat. Larry. He says, hey, Jester, and Kinnikinnick. I'm going to get that all kinds of wrong. I'm not even going to try it. So Kinnikinnick, baby, if I get that right. So let's start off, Rolf. Tell us where that name came from.
Sure. And another name for Kinnikinnick is bearberry, B-E-A-R berry, because I think they're very popular with bears to munch on. But when I was hiking the Colorado Trail, I was hiking with two other folks, and I've really enjoyed trying to learn about plants. And I love this, trying to just learn about plants and animals and wildlife in general. And there's one plant that's pretty popular in a lot of wooded areas, especially a little bit higher altitude, worldwide. It's called Kinnikinnick. It's bearberry, and it just kind of covers the ground. And so I just thought that seemed kind of appropriate. My friends and I thought it was kind of an interesting name. And I mentioned something about it covering ground slowly. And so that seemed to be the hook right there.
There you go. Kinnikinnick. All right. Well, I think I said it right. So
you did.
Kinnikinnick, there it is. So you guys, Kinnikinnick asked me several questions because you've got a hike coming up. You're going to be out on the Benton MacKaye Trail here in about a month, and you're hoping to loop back and do some miles in the Southern Appalachians. And before we get into the questions, tell us what your plan is, what you got going on.
Sure. Well, I don't know how many of your listeners are familiar with the Benton MacKaye Trail, but it is a trail that's named for one of the founders of the Appalachian Trail. And it actually starts at the same point as the southernmost point of the Appalachian Trail at Springer Mountain, or right by Springer Mountain. And I guess the best way to put it is where the Appalachian Trail goes east, the Benton MacKaye Trail goes west. They kind of go, let's see if I can do this with my fingers. They kind of go like this. Then they meet up together again at Fontana Dam. And then they kind of create a smaller loop going up, continuing north in sort of a northeasterly direction. So where the Appalachian Trail mainly goes along ridges in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, the Benton MacKaye Trail takes established trails in Great Smoky Mountains, more along river bottoms. And then they kind of join up again right by Klingman's Dome in Great Smoky Mountain National Park. And it is possible to hike the Benton MacKaye Trail, which is a shade under 300 miles from Springer Mountain, get to the end of it, and then there's about a 2.5 mile trail that connects that to the Appalachian Trail. So some people will hike all the way one direction on the Benton MacKaye Trail and then take the Appalachian Trail back the other way down to Springer Mountain. And that's about 200 miles on the Appalachian Trail. The Benton MacKaye Trail is about 290 miles.
So almost a 500-mile loop. So you're looking
Almost.
at, almost a 500-mile loop. And when are you starting that? That's real soon.
Well, so starting April 6th is my jump-off date from Amicalola Falls State Park. And realistically, I don't know if I'll be able to do the Appalachian Trail going back. I would love to do that. I've got my wife at home with a very active little dog who may drive her crazy if I don't get back, earlier. But
oh no, we're going to cheer you on. Now that we know what you're doing, we're going to pump you up because we want you to come back on the Appalachian Trail.
That would be fun.
Before we get into the questions, why the Benton MacKaye and why this time of year?
Yeah. I really had planned this out initially, and I bought a cheap plane ticket because I would love to section hike the Appalachian Trail in its entirety. And so I thought, well, what better way to start than start at the traditional starting point going northbound and start at Springer Mountain. I bought my plane ticket, and then I started doing a little more research, and I realized two things. One was it's going to be extremely busy with thru hikers who are intending to thru hike the entire Appalachian Trail right at that time. And I almost felt a little, and I felt kind of guilty taking up a spot as a section hiker doing that particular section, that particular time of the year. And I was a little concerned about whether I'd even be able to find a camp spot and all that stuff and the logistics. Although the idea at that point was hike north, get to Damascus right around trail days, maybe experience that craziness and fun.
Yeah.
But then I talked with a friend of mine who had hiked the Appalachian Trail last year, and he did it as a flip-flop, where he started near the midpoint of the trail and did the northern part first, and then hiked south from there back down to Springer. And he loved that. And he also was saying, you're going to have a ton of people there. And the other thing was, I like section hiking. But the thought, I just started hearing a little bit about the Benton MacKaye Trail, which I really hadn't focused on at all, and realized it's going through a lot of the same type of terrain. Far, far fewer people, is my understanding, that once you get off the Appalachian Trail, you will see far fewer folks anyway, maybe not that many people at all. And so that intrigued me. And
well, a lot of the original AT is now the Benton MacKaye. Yeah. And there's this whole, Benton MacKaye and Myron Avery, who are the founding fathers of the Appalachian Trail. They had very different ideals. Benton MacKaye wanted that, green tunnel, forest, not go through towns. Myron Avery, I hope I'm getting this right. Myron Avery wanted the, have your mountain experience, drop down into town. So I don't know if this was rumor I heard over the years, but Benton MacKaye was like, okay, I'm going to create this experience over here. And I do know the Benton MacKaye at mile 4, I believe, crosses over the AT again. So there at Springer Mountain, and it kind of figure eights back. And you'll see the Benton MacKaye Trail again. And I've been on various sections of the Benton MacKaye, done some day hiking. I've been on the Smoky section of the Benton MacKaye. It's absolutely gorgeous. I mean, you're going to have an amazing adventure. And I think one of the first questions, I don't know if you want to read the question that you asked me, and then I'll go over it.
Sure. The first question is, I actually had met two good friends of mine now while I was hiking the Colorado Trail in 2021. They now live in New York. They're going to be coming down. We're all going to meet in Atlanta, and
Oh, that'll be
they're gonna.
great.
So we'll hike it together. So the first question I had was, will my two companions and I be able to get campsites in Great Smoky Mountains National Park for our last week or so of hiking? We do plan on getting on the reservation site as soon as possible, and reservations in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park open up about 30 days ahead of time. So sometime in mid-March, before we start our trip, we'll try to make some reservations. And it's a little tough, though, because you're not sure, we don't want to have something where we're too ambitious and then we can't make it, but we also don't want to have to spend several days just sort of hanging around until our campsites open up.
Yeah. So I did look up some information about this, and I think you'll be happy with the answer. So first of all, the main reason I wanted to go ahead and have you on the show is so we could answer this stuff before you had to make the reservations. And making your reservations going on the Benton MacKaye in the lower part of the Smokies, not a problem. I'll be surprised if you see a lot of people. Now, you might see some day hikers going to some famous places, but that's not an easy stretch to get to. So once you're, crossing over Fontana Dam and getting down into, I think it's a Lakeshore Trail is what it's actually called in the Smokies, you are not going to have the issue getting campsites.
That's great.
And I believe they're spaced out pretty decently between one day you might have to do like a 17 or 18 miler, but if you do between 12 and 15s, I think you're going to be fine. I don't think you're going to have an issue. I think you're going to be surprised when you go on there here in a couple weeks. It'll be open in that area. Now, where it becomes an issue for section hikers going through the Great Smoky Mountains National Park versus a through hiker is you have to make shelter reservations and you have to stay at that particular shelter that you make the reservation for. But there is a caveat specifically for you, Rolf, because the rule for the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, who they identify as a section or a through hiker is different than what I think a through hiker is. So the park itself deems a through hiker somebody that has hiked 50 miles before and intends to hike 50 miles after they're out of the park. So I think you can get reservations on the Benton MacKaye, no problem. And then if you intend to come back and loop up and go up on the AT, you can register as a through hiker because the Smokies, like I said, their definition of what a through hiker is you've been on the trail 50 miles before and you intend to be on the trail 50 miles after. So then the rule of thumb is, yes, everybody, including through hikers, section hikers, overnighters, they want everybody in the shelter. And I think the shelter sleeps up to 12 people. Mm-hmm. Then if the shelter gets full, the through hikers can tent. And that's the way it works. So it seems like it should be the opposite. Like the section hikers should give up their, their bed or whatever, their space in the shelter versus a through hiker. But I will be honest with you. Every time I've been up there, there's never been an issue. Everybody is just like, oh, no problem. I'll go tent or what have you. There's not been an issue. The issue is you want to make sure you have a reservation one way or the other. Because I would say every time I've been up there, I have met a ranger asking for permits and things like that. So, and I've actually had rangers stay at shelters because there may have been an active bear in the area or something like that. So hopefully that answers your question on that one or eases your mind a little bit.
That really eases my mind on both counts, especially going northbound on the actual Benton MacKaye Trail. And then I really was curious because I just thought, well, if it's kind of crowded or if it's difficult to get a campsite on the Benton MacKaye part of the trail, heading back southbound along the Appalachian Trail in the park, I figured would probably be really busy, even like in May, heading back southbound. So that's great, and I'll double check on that when I make the reservations
Yeah, do
too.
double
But
check
that's
on that. And I want to say here, Skunk Ape put, he made sure he got to the shelters late so they would be full so he could use his hammock. So there is a strategy.
yes.
Yeah.
I would
But
I'd much prefer to tent myself.
there
Yeah.
you go. Yeah. But I will say, depending on which shelter you stay at, some of them are harder to tent at than others because, I mean, they're up at those 6,000 foot peaks. And there's not a lot of level ground. So if you are going to tent, everybody is usually vying for those spots. But like I said, I have never had an issue, and people are so kind, and probably not supposed to say this either, and the park probably does it like this, but I have been in those shelters and there are 20 people packed in there because it's pouring down the rain. The weather changed and it got cold, and everybody's just like in that survival mode, like, yeah, come on, we can make room, and stuff like that.
Oh, that's great. That's great to hear.
Yeah.
It's
So I don't
exciting.
think you're
I've
going to have any
never.
worries.
Yeah, it's super exciting. I've never hiked out east, and I'm just really looking forward to seeing that. I got to plug in my computer here. There we go. Seeing that, this part of the country.
Yeah. You're going
And
to love it.
I know
You're
it'll
going to
be a
love
little
it.
wet and rainy, but that's fine.
Well, okay, that is almost guaranteed, especially in the Smokies, but
Yeah,
you never know. You never know.
that's
All right, what
terrific.
else you got?
Let's see. Next question was, and we kind of talked about some of that. I said, if I become really ambitious and my wife is okay with it, I might try to hike back south along the Appalachian Trail to Springer Mountain for the 500-mile figure eight. And you've answered that question already. That my understanding is that only AT through hikers can camp in tents, and only AT through hikers don't need reservations for the shelters. But if I'm understanding correctly, through hiker is not necessarily AT. It's if you start 50 miles before and then 50 miles after, if that's your intent. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and the park, I mean, you got to consider there's more, the AT is, I think, 78 miles of the park of 900 miles of trails. So there's people out there doing all kinds of loops and configurations. So the park is you intend to be out 50 miles before and then 50 miles after.
Cool. That's great. And the next question was change of not talking about reservations or anything more, but I said, I'm thinking of going stoveless, and I'm wondering what you and your listeners think of that. I went stoveless on my 2-week hike of the Collegiate Loop in Colorado in late August and early September last year, and that worked out okay. But if there might be a lot of cold rain in early to mid-April, I might want to take along a stove. So I was just curious what people's thoughts were on that.
All right, so you guys heard him. So in the chat, you could put your thoughts on that while I'm giving my thoughts on that. So I never go stoveless if I'm staying out overnight or a couple nights or whatever it is, because I like that hot meal in the evening before bedtime. I think it actually helps me go to sleep better. But specifically, I need a stove because I got to have that morning coffee. I don't care what time it is. There is, and I've had people around me, I mean, they're chugging cold coffee and all that stuff. I cannot do it. I cannot do it. But specifically with the time frame that you're going in April, it'll be cold. It'll be cold. So if you're an evening tea drinker or coffee drinker, or you like that warm meal, I don't think I would ever go in the Smokies without a stove. I don't think anyone could convince me of that, because once you get up on the ridge, I mean, you're up there for a few days, hovering between 5,000 and 6,000 feet, and maybe never going below 5,000 feet, which doesn't seem like much coming from Colorado. But, the Smokies is considered a rainforest. So when those temperatures drop, it gets crazy. It gets crazy. So, well, let's see what the chat has to say. So Chris says, April's too cold for him to go stoveless. Ian, stove. Hammock Hanger says, he tried it for about a week and had to swap back. He had to have warm food. Side Trail Adventures. Hey, Austin. Austin says stove all day and twice on Sundays. So there you go. I think the people have spoken, Rolf.
The
So what do you
verdict
think?
is in. I think that we're talking about less than a pound for a, tiny BRS type stove, and then a,
Yeah.
4 ounce thing. I've the reason I was thinking of the reason I did try stoveless on the loop was that there were times when I was hiking the Colorado Trail, I'd be so tired at the end of the day. It was like the heck with my hot meal. One day I just had like a, tortilla with peanut butter and M&Ms wrapped up inside it, and it was like dinner. That's great, and then collapsed asleep. Yeah, there's something to be said for hot for hot food and hot drink, and I think that your listeners right there have kind
Yeah,
of sealed
they
the
have
deal.
spoken. And now, listen, if you were like, listen, Jester, I got pots and pans and all this other kind of stuff, I'd be like, look, don't do that. But a small little BRS stove, I mean, it's not
Yeah,
really going to make or break.
right.
And one thing I've thought of, you didn't mention clothing. I mean, you're from Colorado, you've hiked in those high peaks. Same goes for the Smokies terrain. I mean, be prepared to be, it could be 80 during the day and then get down, 35 at night or 30, just depending. And it wouldn't shock me. It would not shock me in April if it snowed
hmm
up
hmm
there. So, yeah.
That's something I'm going to pay attention to. I have something called Raynaud syndrome. So where your fingers they can turn white down to the first or even second knuckle. And from cold, your capillaries just constrict at a much higher temperature than people. Well, usually capillaries don't constrict at all for people, but it can happen in your fingers and your toes. And so I have to be real careful to keep my whole body warm, and especially my hands. So I'm going to have uh, plenty of, I'll have plenty of warm clothes with me. Maybe a little bit of overkill on that, but I'm really trying to keep my base weight at about 12 or 13 pounds. And so I
That's
just
not
need to
bad.
for,
That's not bad. Do
no,
you carry, because you have to deal with that, do you carry hand warmers?
I will probably take along one set of total emergency hand warmers. I used to like backcountry skiing here in Colorado, and now I have to use hand warmers every day when I'm skiing. But and it's kind of constricted my interest in backcountry skiing or hiking through, a ton of snow. But definitely on the Colorado Trail, there were the year I did it, it rained quite a bit, and there was cold, there was hail, and it really helped to have things like bread bags to put
Mm.
between your trail runners and warm, dry socks. That really helped me out one day when I was walking through like about 2 or 3 inches even of leftover slush from a hailstorm, and it was like walking through a Slurpee, and
Oh,
my
God.
feet were freezing. But I stopped. Uh, I was shivering, and I stopped and got my gloves on, my mittens on, my overmitts, and for my feet, it made a huge difference just putting on some dry socks and then some bread bags on top of the socks, and then putting my trail runners back on, and my feet automatically felt a whole lot warmer. Just it was like a vapor barrier liner essentially for my feet. So
Excellent. I
that's
love having people on that hike on the West Coast because I learned stuff. I mean, I've seen that before where people, have brought even the grocery plastic bags that you get at the
hmm
grocery or bread bags.
hmm
And that's not necessarily something you have to worry about on the East Coast, but it's something that I think about. Okay, the conditions I'm going out in, my body temperature, and with you, knowing that you have that condition with your hands and things. I mean, these are things to think about.
it did make a big difference for me. But I realized that on that day when I was hiking and was just shivering, there was another guy who I met who was hiking along in shorts
Oh,
and
wow.
uh, and just shorts and a rain jacket. And he didn't seem to be bothered. I had on every bit of clothing, and frankly, most of the people. There were 3 or 4 people I saw hiking through that hailstorm, and most of them were like me. But your mileage may vary, and I envy those folks who are pretty impervious to cold weather. But I'm not one of those people.
I am not either. I am rain gear all year, every time I go out, no matter the temperature, because I know what happens when my core temperature drops.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm not one of those that can hang out in shorts when it's 30 degrees. Doesn't work.
Yeah, yeah. For me, it's definitely going to be the zip off type pants work out real well for me, and I may be wearing them zipped in quite a bit more on this trail. And the last question I had was finally I said I hope someday to section hike the Appalachian Trail, and wonder if you have any suggestions on that. And you've already answered
Of
my question.
course.
I'm gonna be listening to all those podcasts for sure. I did say I do know now that as a section hiker, I shouldn't go northbound from Springer Mountain in March or April. And that's why when I found out about the Benton MacKaye Trail, and by the way, behind me, I don't know if you can see, I have only some of the publications I got from the Benton MacKaye Trail Association. That is, for a trail I had barely heard about. They are extremely, they've done a fantastic job. Their website is wonderful, bmta.org, I believe it is, and just the website has amazing tools on how to hike the trail as a section hiker or as a through hiker. And the written materials they have are just, equal to what I've seen for the Colorado Trail and for the Appalachian Trail. I'm interested in the Arizona Trail also. I've
And I
gotten
see that
publications.
green book in the background. The gentleman that wrote that book, I can't think of his name right now. He has written. I mean, that book is very detailed about the Benton MacKaye Trail. And if
Yeah,
anybody, I
let me grab
recommend
it.
anybody getting that. Yeah, grab it real quick. I can't remember the guy's name.
Let me get my headphones back on here. Here we go. Yeah, this is really, really well done. It's called the Benton MacKaye Through Hiker's Guide. There we go.
Yes, that's like an original. What is the guy's name? He has a
Uh,
website too.
it it is by the Engmans, and he is Sergeant Rock. Is
Sergeant
his
Rock. That's it. That's his
yeah,
trail name.
right.
He that book reminds me of the old AT Through Hiker's Companion, and I've got
Yeah,
some old versions of the Through Hiker's Companion where I wrote notes about my various section hikes, and I'm going to pull those out when I start going over my series on the 26th of March. So you guys will have to join me. I'm going to pull out my book. And I'm going to read some stuff that I wrote back from 2006, 2007, 2008, and kind of compare, how the trail was back then to now. So yeah, I think it'll be a good time. And that gentleman, he's got a website. He's got all kinds of information. And I think there is something called the AT kickoff down at Amicalola Falls here next weekend. And he's usually there talking about the Benton MacKaye, selling those books. I have a quick question for you, though. So, have you decided to hike the approach trail?
yes. I'm
Okay.
gonna
Why did you decide that?
uh, mainly the approach trail from Amicalola Falls
Yeah.
up to Springer Mountain. Because initially, when I made my reservations, I was really concerned about I was hearing about all the people. So I thought, well, I'd already bought my plane ticket, so the die was cast. But then I thought, well, I will make a reservation at the lodge, and that's expensive. But I also thought, well, I'll be able to get a couple other people who might want to pitch in with me. And as a matter of fact, that's exactly what's going to happen. Um, but I thought I'd like to just experience it. I'd like to see the visitor center. I'd like to see where people get their Appalachian Trail through hike badges. I'd like to see that arch, that iconic arch that people walk through. I would like to see those 700 steps that
Yeah, I
you
was
have
going to
to
say
take.
you want to walk up all 790. They're not that bad. It's not that bad.
Yeah,
People make it.
yeah, it'll
Listen, if you can't make it from Amicalola Falls State Park to Springer Mountain, I question whether you'll be able to hike the AT.
right. And I won't even have to go that far because the first day I'll just be hiking up there to the lodge. That'll just be a nice kind of get my feet wet after I've been sitting in the plane for a while, and then spend the night, have a great breakfast, and then take off for about another, I guess, about 8 miles to get to Springer Mountain. And our goal is to get to Springer Mountain and maybe hike it's mainly uphill to Springer, of
Oh
course, and
yeah.
then from there it's sort of downish to get to the first bridge along the Benton MacKaye Trail, where so we're thinking maybe we'll make it to there, which is about 16 miles, which is pretty ambitious for the first day. So it
It's
wouldn't
not too bad.
surprise.
Yeah, so those that don't start on the approach trail and they don't have that 8 miles or 9 mile, I think it's almost 9 miles up.
Yeah,
It's a tease when you start the AT because it's a gradual downhill for 4 miles and you're like, oh, this is nothing, ah, la la, and then it's like, nope, here comes Georgia.
right,
So
right,
I
and
think you'll
that
be
is,
okay.
but that is something that I have no doubt is going to be an eye opener for me, or a knee opener. I just hiking the Colorado Trail. It is gorgeous. It is high altitude, and I've met people from out east who've had trouble with altitude sickness to begin with, but then they've gone on to crush the trail because uh, it is a trail that is graded for stock, and it is graded. A lot of it that's outside wilderness area is graded for mountain bikes as well, and so it's technically not as difficult as the trails. I've seen a little bit of the trails out east. I went with a trip with my wife and our in-laws to out east, and that's where I was up by Klingman's Dome, and we hiked a little bit, and also up in Maine, and realized, the trails up here have lots and lots of rocks and roots and mud, and
And see,
uh,
I call the West Coast trails the sexy trails because they don't have
uh,
all that. And I'm like, oh, they're so
right,
well groomed, and but then you have the altitude and other things to
right.
exchange for it. So yeah, I'm excited
But
for
yeah,
you, Rolf.
and they don't have out on the Colorado Trail. They've got switchbacks, and my understanding is that people out east don't believe in switchbacks. So,
Well, they
so
do. But yeah, not as much as
not
not as
as
much as
much.
that. So, but I've heard horror stories of the Benton MacKaye Trail of the steepness. So I just threw that out there for you.
Yeah,
So that it's tough, and people underestimate Georgia on the Appalachian Trail. And it's tough. So, but you know
yeah.
what? I am so excited for you, and I
Oh,
hope
me too.
to answer your last question that I've convinced you that you should hike or section hike the Appalachian Trail. And you could do it in chunks. I've seen people do it over, the course of 4 years where they chunk out 500 miles, 500 miles. And it sounds like, that might be something, maybe you're thinking
Yeah,
at this point, hopefully.
that's exactly it. I'm hoping that I could do it in a number of years, and maybe even go twice a year, and just I'll be 65 in June, so I've got a limited window to realistically to do this, and I would love to do that though. There's the Appalachian Trail, and then some other trails that I'm interested in. Arizona Trail. Maybe I'd like to finish the Continental Divide Trail within Colorado, at least, and who knows? There's just so many beautiful trails in this country.
I know. We all say that all the time. It's like there's just so much. And I think you partially answered Austin's question over at Side Trail Adventures. He says, besides the AT and the BMT, any other trails on your hiking radar for the future? And you said the Arizona Trail, finishing
Yes.
up the Continental Divide Trail in Colorado. Anything else on the East Coast? But I mean,
Yes. Foothills Trail. That looks
okay.
fantastic in South Carolina. That looks absolutely wonderful. The What's the trail that's in Kentucky? Um,
Oh, the Natchez Trace? The
Not the
Natchez, no,
Natchez
not the Natchez
Trace.
Trace. What is it? It's something like that. All right, people in
Um,
the chat, what's the trail in Kentucky? I can't think of it, but it's like 230 miles or something like that.
yeah, and it has a Native American name. I can't
Oh,
remember
the
the name of it.
Sheltowee Trace.
Shelter We Trace. That's
Sheltowee
it.
Trace, not the Natchez Trace. That's something else. So,
Yes, the Shelter We Trace. I've
yes.
seen videos of that, and it looks fabulous as well. And then there's my gosh, there's so many other trails out there. The New England Trail, the Potomac Heritage. Those are different kinds of trails where there's a lot more road walking and stuff. I don't mind a little bit of road walking, or even a fair amount. So I would look forward to doing that. So yeah, there we go. Yeah, Sheltoe Trace from the
Something
Side
like
Trail.
that. He's not sure if we spelled it right, but we get it. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
definitely the trails. I think it's either 211 miles or 231 miles or something like that. But see, Kentucky is underestimated too because they also have the Cumberland Trail, which is
oh yeah,
very rugged, and cuts down through Kentucky down into Tennessee. So
hmm
there's a lot to do for you, Rolf, here on the East Coast.
yeah, and then of course in between in Arkansas and Missouri have some terrific trails too. The Ouachita Trail and a couple of other trails around there. So the Far Out app even has you can buy a package of all the different trails they've got in Arkansas and Missouri, and there's I had no idea there were so many trails.
I know. I think I saw the Far Out app. Have they gone to, or you can choose to do a subscription based service now where you'll have access to everything? And I'm like, oh no, that's dangerous. It's very dangerous.
They've just started that after I bought a whole bunch of
Well, of
trails just
course. Yeah.
just because I wanted to have them in my quiver, and it's fun to read them ahead of time. And if any of your listeners don't use the Far Out app, oh my gosh, I would certainly recommend that. It's
Oh,
uh,
100%. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, for sure. So before we sign off, this has been great. And I want to do more of this. So anybody out there listening, if you got questions, email me. You never know. You might end up on the show. I'd love this format. But before we close out, you've also done some other amazing things, and you are currently a park patroller
yes.
in your local area and some of your local state parks and things. So, close us out by talking about that, maybe what you got into with that, and then you went on an amazing adventure back in 1987. So, speak on that a
Yeah.
little bit.
Sure, I'll just give you the short version of that. I was working in as a lawyer, and after 4 years in this big old law firm, picked up a book called "Walk Across America" by
Oh
a
my God,
gentleman
my
named
favorite book
by Peter
ever.
Jenkins. Yeah,
Yes.
isn't that great? And that's changed my
That's what
life.
got me to hike the AT. Was that book? My
Oh,
dad said, "Hey, why don't you read this book?" I
wow.
love that book. Yes.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's that was my inspiration too, and I thought, uh, I was at the stage where I just dreaded going into work, and picked up that book. It was such a wonderful, romantic, inspirational read, and I thought I'm going to try something like that, but I want to start in Mexico and go to Canada. And of course, back in 1987, did I even think about anything like the Pacific Crest Trail or the Continental Divide Trail? No, I just didn't think that I was. If I even thought about the Pacific Crest Trail, I just thought, well, I can't possibly do that. I'm not skilled enough or experienced enough or whatever. I didn't have the Grandma Gatewood brashness, to just go and do it.
Oh, come
So,
on.
but I came up with my own little. I used literally a Rand McNally road atlas and
Oh,
just sort of
wow.
plotted out this route that took me along smaller roads for the most part. And as time went by, I got more comfortable going off on trails, and so I started in Arizona, and I made it all the way up to near Portland, Oregon, and then finally just got tired of having the wind always blowing into my left ear walking north along the because I was walking right along the coast. Um, but it changed my life. It when I finished that, I realized I wanted to move. I moved to Colorado. I took became really involved in the Colorado Mountain Club. Uh, Learned a lot of different outdoor techniques and ended up becoming an instructor after learning from others. And I always, and ironically, I did go back to being a lawyer. I worked for a transit agency in Colorado for 30 years before I retired. But it was a different kind of practice. It wasn't all consuming. It was more of a, not exactly 9 to 5 job, but not like the private law firms. You're working, seems like 20 hours a day sometimes. But I was able to do that as an avocation. And when I retired, I thought now I can really I've been blessed with reasonably good health, and I would love to be outdoors. And if there are any of your listeners who are retired or approaching retirement age, parks are begging for volunteers. And they won't necessarily say that. Sometimes they don't have the best advertising. But if you actually call up people and say, hey, I would love to go out and pick up trash on your trails, you will probably find people saying, be happy to have you. Their main concern in training you as a park patroller is that you not think you're a mall cop, and that you're out there to ticket people. And no, you've got to stay away from, let the park rangers be the park rangers. You're out there to pick up trash, help people out, give directions, be a bit of a naturalist maybe if people want to. My favorite thing is to say, do you have 30 seconds? I could tell you a little about the dam on this trail, or about the birds you can see around here. And I think the do you have 30 seconds part helps because people realize they won't be, hijacked by some well-meaning person. It's like,
like, oh boy, here we go.
Oh, no, now I'm stuck with this guy for 15 minutes, So, and that really works out. And I have a little dog. I don't know if I thought I heard her whining.
Yeah, where is she? Bring her on.
Let me see if I can open the door and call her.
We all love dogs.
Sophie.
Well, I think we all love dogs.
Come here, Sophie. Sophie.
And of course, her name is Sophie.
Her name is Sophie. Here we go. Come here, Sophie. Come on, girlie.
Okay, this is why
come here, sweetie pie.
you can't be gone long. It's not really about your wife, Rolf. It's about the dog.
It's about the dog. Here we go. This is Sophie.
Sophie.
And Sophie is a bark patroller for Jefferson County Open Space, which means she sets good behavior by.
I love it. Everybody needs to put dog emojis in the chat for Sophie.
So Sophie walks next to me. She tries not to jump up on people too much. When we come walking along, and I've got my little.
Sophie messed up the headphones.
There we go. Oh, there we go.
Rolf.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
She messed him up. Just a sec. Sophie.
So I can hear you.
There we go.
We're back in business. Yeah.
There we go. Can you hear me? Okay. Thanks a lot, Sophie. So, but anyway, she we set good behavior, and the mere fact that we're walking along and I've got a little badge on my arm, gets people to keep their dogs on leash, because that's important, especially, so anyway, 100%. I encourage people to do that. Yeah.
Excellent, Rolf. Well, listen, this has been, it's unbelievable that 50 minutes has gone by already. I say this every show. I don't know how the time goes by fast. It's been an amazing conversation. Really appreciate everybody being in the chat today. Larry, I don't know if you're still here, but really appreciate you joining this morning. And Rolf, don't be a stranger. And what I mean by that is, after you get done with this hike, I want to have you back on. Let's have you back on in the fall, and let's hear all about it.
Okay, now that's my incentive. I got to get this done now.
And your incentive is to finish the Benton MacKaye Trail, number 1, and number 2, get that permit and come back on the Appalachian Trail. So there's your incentive.
That would be awesome.
All right, Rolf, really appreciate it. I'm going to switch over the screen here. All right, you guys, another amazing episode. Rolf, don't go anywhere. I want to chat with you after the show. Really appreciate everybody being here. As always, you guys, thanks for listening. Be safe out there, and happy section hiking.